Over the weekend, Trump was speaking at a rally in North Carolina when he stumbled over a few words a bit. Take a look at this.
We are a nation that just recently heard that Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat your...
What? With the Suddenly, Trump turned into a Spice Girls. I really wanted to say, Sound like his brain got a flat. To make it seem like he meant to say that, they made it his new campaign slogan. Trump 24, Kabuja.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Tuesday, March 5th. Happy Super Tuesday, guys.
Oh,
it's good, right? Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have the host of Way Too Early, White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire.
I liked it.
NBC News National Affairs analyst John Heilman's here. Why are you here so early?
I don't know.
That's a lot for us at 6 in the morning.
He rolls in right from the club.
God,
so it works out well.
it's too much.
Just
we
crashing.
Need, like, to
Hey, it's super. It's like I go on Start Super Tuesday.
Exactly.
On a super note.
I have to prepare emotionally for Heilman to be in the room. U.S. special correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay, is with us as well. And, you know, so important that it's Super Tuesday. I just have a little announcement to make, though, personal. Hobson is now an emotional support dog. Isn't that
so exciting.
Yes, Joe. I know you love Hobson so much, except for his humping problem. But he's a,
Wow.
Yeah.
Why is that a problem?
I don't know how we.
6:01 a.m.
How do you stop a dog from doing that?
Why is that a problem?
You know,
Some dogs can't be stopped from that.
I was just stretching because Joe was still getting his mic on, so I was helping you out.
I really need. Well, you know,
Congratulations, Hobson.
You could have stretched just a little bit less on that.
He's a good dog. I do want some advice on that.
No. You know, sweetheart, you will find I may talk a lot. Sweetie? Hey, sweetie.
Rapidly.
Yeah.
I may talk a lot, but I want you to know that it's the things that I don't say that have kept me on the air here now for 16 years.
This is this is not just specific. A lot of dogs suffer from this problem.
Yeah, okay. So, Willie, Super Tuesday today. The stakes, well, they just couldn't be any lower. Take us through it.
You know, the word that comes to mind, Joe, on this Super Tuesday is not the one Mika raised, and has totally derailed the show. Is anticlimax, I think it's fair to say, which is that
there's no doubt
Donald Trump expected to roll through the states, Joe Biden unopposed as well. I'm going to power through right here. Watch his voters.
Can we throw a sound or something?
Let's get to something else here. They're going to go to the polls, voters are. 16 states.
I will say this, Willie. They're going to go to the polls, but they're going to wake up tomorrow on hump day for the week, and I think they're going to probably see.
Yeah, we were starting to recover. Oh, look at that.
So, anyway,
just come out
take us through it,
and now you sucked us back in. Sorry, so 16 states, one U.S. territory. American Samoa also on the board.
Into the fourth hour of Morning Joe, and voters are beginning to head to the polls across 16 states and one U.S. territory this morning for Super Tuesday. It is the busiest day on the primary calendar. You're looking at live pictures out of Nashville, which does not look too busy. No, not at all. Tonight could be Nikki Haley's last stand with former President Trump leading the polls and in the number of delegates won so far. NBC News correspondent Garrett Hake is in Florida with more.
This morning, the road to the White House stretching from coast to coast as Republican voters in 15 states, from Alaska to Alabama, cast their primary ballots. GOP frontrunner Donald Trump, who swept the first 7 states of the primary, is widely expected to pick up the lion's share of the more than 800 delegates at stake today.
Haley, she's not a problem. I think she's very negative for the party, but she's not a problem in terms of winning because we're winning by a lot.
It's great to be here in Fort Worth.
While Nikki Haley, fresh off her first victory of the campaign over the weekend in Washington, D.C., taking aim at Trump in Texas, arguing since his first term, he's been a drag on the party as a whole, with losses at the state and federal levels.
at some point, maybe we should say the reason that America keeps losing is because of Donald Trump.
Today's Super Tuesday contests come on the heels of a unanimous Supreme Court ruling Monday in Mr. Trump's favor, ordering his name be included on primary ballots in Colorado and other states where courts or officials had tried to bar him for allegedly engaging in insurrection on January 6th.
You cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way.
Mr. Trump praising the ruling and arguing he's been politically targeted by the Biden Department of Justice.
They're nonsense cases, and everybody sees it.
The Biden campaign responding, calling Mr. Trump's statement, quote, unhinged, confused ramblings focused only on himself.
NBC's Garrett Hake with that report. And as Garrett mentioned, Donald Trump will remain on the ballot despite court decisions in some states to make him ineligible for the 2024 election. The Supreme Court yesterday unanimously rejected the ruling from Colorado's Supreme Court that removed the former president from the ballot based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Joining us now, Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold. She will oversee today's Colorado primary and is chair of the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. So a twofold first question for you. Your reaction, of course, to the Supreme Court ruling. And how do you think the primaries are going to go today?
Good morning. Happy Super Tuesday. Thanks for having me on. First and foremost, I would say that it's good the Supreme Court actually rendered their decision. In Colorado, 500,000 people had already voted in the Republican primary. Coloradans deserve to know and Americans deserve to know whether Donald Trump is a qualified candidate. With that said, I'm disappointed in the decision. I think states like Colorado deserve to have the choice to keep oath-breaking insurrectionists off of our ballots. And there's larger implications for federal insurrectionists running for federal office under this decision. Super Tuesday, everything's going great in Colorado. I assume we're going to have great elections across the nation, and just encourage your voters to make their voices heard. Democracy is on the ballot this year. There are so many crucial issues that Americans can weigh in on, and we do that at the polls.
Madam Secretary, it was noteworthy that even though it was a unanimous opinion, some of the justices suggested that perhaps they disagreed with the idea that solely Congress could step in and prevent an insurrectionist, as you say, from running again. Do you have any faith, though, that Congress will ever step forward with legislation that could safeguard this piece of our elections?
I think that's one of the big concerns from this decision. The majority of the Supreme Court decided Congress could act. But this Congress is almost non-functional, so the likelihood of that is very low. That means that if there is an oath-breaking insurrectionist running for any federal office, they basically have, just freedom to run without any consequence. The purpose of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, at least in my view, is to safeguard the country from insurrectionists taking office and destroying democracy from within. So I think it's really concerning given that this Congress is so unlikely to take any type of real action on the matter.
Secretary Griswold, have you had to, town by town, city by city, county by county in Colorado, make any extra preventive security measures to protect poll workers?
Unfortunately, in Colorado, we have seen a lot of threats to election officials, and predominantly, to tell you the truth, elected election officials, myself, county clerks, people in our offices. And yes, we have really focused on physical security since actually 2021, to tell you the truth. That includes legislative changes. I led a law making it a crime to open carry close to voting. We made it a crime to dox or retaliate against election workers. I also led the nation's first law making it a felony to compromise voting equipment. And then I just announced last week $3.5 million for counties to further increase their physical security and access for voters. Seeing the threat environment, it is incredibly concerning. We have had 38% of our county clerks step down since 2020.
Wow. That is incredible.
With that said,
yeah, go ahead.
We can't allow people who would use intimidation or threats to win that battle. What they're trying to do is get good Republicans and Democrats to step down so that people who do not believe in the right to vote can step in. I will not be intimidated. Just from this Supreme Court case, I've received over 500 violent threats since it was filed initially in September. I won't be intimidated. We are ready to go in Colorado. And frankly, we cannot allow people who would use threats to win.
Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. And thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. Let's go straight to the big board on this Super Tuesday. NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, your latest article for NBCNews.com explains why the delegate math shows Haley has little room to stop Trump. So I'm curious, given all that and what we're looking at tonight, what you'll be looking for digging into the numbers tonight.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, first of all, the big picture thing to keep in mind here is you look in yellow, all the states on the Republican side with contests today. The rules on the Republican side for this primary season are designed to produce a quick and decisive winner, a quick and decisive nominee. So keep that in mind when you look at the rules inside of some of these states. That's Haley's first challenge. I'll give you the most dramatic example on the map. It's the biggest state on the map, California. 169 delegates up for grabs today. That's the biggest of any state. And in California, there are two major things working against Haley. Number one, it is a closed primary. There are no independents, no Democrats who are allowed to participate. We have seen that is the backbone of her strength in a lot of these contests we've had so far. And secondly, in California, the rules are a simple majority of the statewide vote, 50% plus one, and you get all 169 delegates. So the combination of that threshold and a closed primary makes Donald Trump the overwhelming favorite to collect all 169 in California. The second biggest prize today is Texas, 161 delegates. Rules are a little bit different than California, but again, this is a very conservative Republican electorate in Texas. Demographically, it is very much Trump-friendly. It doesn't fit the profile of some of these states, some of these areas in states that Nikki Haley has fared the best. And again, it's winner-take-all for a statewide pool of at-large delegates, and then it's winner-take-all in each one of the congressional districts. Do you just look at the demographics of Texas, you compare it to what we've seen so far, and Trump is heavily favored to take the overwhelming share of these 161. Basically, with those two states right away, you can probably Trump to be north of 300 delegates just there, and then you add in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, in Alabama. These are essentially winner-take-all states. Huge favorable demographics for Donald Trump there. Tennessee, it's a little quirky with some fine print in the rules, but that could be another target for Trump to get all of the delegates here. So where could Haley make any kind of noise tonight, maybe make a splash? Probably her best chance to win a state is right here. It is Vermont. Donald Trump in the 2016 primaries, the first time he ran, only got 32% of the vote in Vermont. There's no party registration in Vermont. Independents, Democrats, people who think of themselves that way, free to participate in this. And obviously, it's a deeply blue state, so you might have a lot of voters who don't really consider themselves Republicans, but who like the chance to vote against Donald Trump. So you could see that in Vermont. Virginia's interesting, too, especially congressional districts in the northern part of the state here, just outside Washington, D.C. Demographically, they absolutely fit the profile of where Haley's been doing well in these primaries. In fact, they're even better demographically for her than a lot of the areas that have voted so far. In Virginia, you can collect delegates by congressional districts, so there are opportunities for Haley to pick off some there. Minnesota and Colorado, again, complicated rules, but she could get a chunk of the delegates there. But the bottom line here is she's been talking, 43% in New Hampshire is her high water mark. If you're getting 43% across the board tonight, that is going to translate into very few delegates. And meanwhile, Donald Trump, that lead he has right now over Haley, he could be near 1,000 delegates. If it breaks, sort of as I'm showing here, if it breaks that way, he could be near 1,000 delegates by the end of tonight. with 12-15 the magic number.
And of course, the Haley campaign has pledged that she'd stay in through Super Tuesday. That's today. Beyond that, we're not quite sure what the future holds. Steve, though, Trump has racked up win after win after win during this process outside of the District of Columbia. But there have been warning signs, too, like whether it's a turnout or percentage of votes that he's received, that point to some vulnerabilities for the fall. What are you going to be looking at tonight that could be more flashing warning signs for Trump, even if he wins, but could have concern level for the general election?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's interesting. I mean, we know we've known since 2016 where Trump's problems are and where his vulnerabilities are in a general election. They're in the suburbs. They're with typically college-educated voters in the suburbs, a little bit more on the higher income side of things. And so that is where he has had his worst showing so far in these primaries. Haley was able to win a congressional district in South Carolina, down by Charleston, had by far the highest concentration of college-educated voters in the state of any congressional district. So there, as I say, there are districts in Virginia that fit that. There's some districts in Minnesota that fit that. There's some places in Colorado that fit that. So you're looking there, for Trump's weakness tonight. But in terms of how applicable it is to the general election, I would just caution on that, because we've seen this in the polling now consistently, and we had 4 new polls come out over the weekend, 4 new major national polls on top of our own NBC poll from a few weeks ago that all put Donald Trump ahead by a slight margin. And when you look inside those polls and you look at what looks like potential slippage with Republican voters in these primaries, you do not see it in general election polls. You look at Republican voters in general election polling, Trump is getting more than 90% and losing only 2 or 3% of them. And I think one of the things you're seeing in these primaries is that there is evidence in states that have open primaries or semi-open primaries that there's a large segment of voters who are going to vote for Biden in the fall, who voted for Biden in 2020, who absolutely can't stand Donald Trump, and they tend to be in these suburban areas, who are participating in the Republican primary. The rules allow them to. They want to vote against Trump. They take the opportunity to do it. And I think that's added in these states to some of that non-Trump total, because the polling is also suggesting here a lot of that Haley vote will indeed, the general election polling we saw over the weekend, a lot of that Haley vote is prepared to go and back Donald Trump. So, we'll take a look at those suburbs as they come in tonight. But I also think, as we were saying last week with Biden in Michigan and that uncommitted vote, there's some reason to take it with a pretty big grain of salt.
All right, NBC's Steve Kornacki. I know you'll be watching every moment of this. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. to break down today's results. And coming up on Morning Joe, we'll get a live report from both South Carolina and Florida, where Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, the campaigns, are monitoring today's Super Tuesday results. Morning Joe will be back in a moment.
They call it Super Tuesday for a reason. And I think it's going to be record-setting. I hope so. But that sends the signal, because what we're really doing is we're aiming at that November 5th date.
This is not personal. This is about the fact that we have to win. We can want to change the country all day long, but if we can't win an election, we can't do any of that. I don't know why everybody's so adamant that they have to follow Trump's lead to get me out of this race. All of these people deserve to vote.
That was former President Donald Trump last night, laying out his expectations for today's Super Tuesday contests. And Nikki Haley moments ago on Fox News on why she is not throwing in the towel yet. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Ali Vitale live in South Carolina covering the Haley campaign, and NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard live in Florida covering the Trump campaign. And joining the conversation is co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Simone Sanders Townsend. Ali, we'll start with you. What are you hearing from the Haley campaign and from voters today?
Yeah, look, Mika, this is not usually what election days will look like. Vaughn and I should be at campaign headquarters, at watch parties, and instead we're probably just going to be standing in pretty generic locations because neither of these candidates are out on the campaign trail actively campaigning. Of course, Trump will be at Mar-a-Lago, and Haley, for her part, I'm told, is going to likely be watching the results tonight come in from her home on Kiowa Island. As for her campaign staff, several of them are likely to gather at campaign headquarters. They did do their final event last night in Texas. It was a raucous crowd in Fort Worth. But this is what some of them said to me, mainly the fact that they want Haley, or they're probably going for Biden. Watch.
Have y'all ever voted Trump?
No.
No.
So what happens in 2024 if it's Trump versus Biden?
Well, are we on camera?
Biden, probably.
For you?
I've been voting since I was 18, you know. I'm a strict Republican, but I'm not going for Trump.
Yeah. So you'll go for Biden?
I'll vote for whoever. I want to vote for Haley. That's who I want to vote for. That's why I'm here.
He's going to stick in the race, and we're going to be able to vote for her.
But what happens if on Wednesday morning she wakes up and Tuesday was a clean sweep across the board for Trump? Should she stay in or get out?
I think she should stay in. Yeah, she's got, like she says, she's got a lot more states to come.
And look, Mika, she might. I think that if we're reading the tea leaves here, the Haley campaign has been specifically vague about what happens after this mile marker of Super Tuesday. On the one hand, Haley has said in donor meetings and publicly that she wants to have the strongest showing possible that she can on Super Tuesday. She's been vague in saying she'll be in this race for as long as she's competitive. That's not exactly a specific metric that we should be looking for here, but Haley could, in the same way that she could end up ending her bid tonight, she could also end up staying in through Georgia, through Louisiana. That would put her through the end of the month. The Trump campaign, as Vaughn will tell you, doesn't expect and can't clinch their bid tonight. Haley could go until he does. It's not a money problem, as it often is with these campaigns. Haley has been a prolific fundraiser and has a lot of money still in the bank. That could allow her to keep going. And then, of course, the other question that I was asking voters is, what if she doesn't, and she does or doesn't endorse the former president? Haley said she didn't seem bound by that RNC pledge to endorse the eventual nominee. She said she's going to do what she wants to do. But for voters that I spoke to, many of them, whether they would vote for Trump in a general or not, those Haley supporters say they would be disappointed if she endorsed him, at least right off the bat, Mika.
NBC's Ali Vitale, thank you very much. And in an interview yesterday with a far-right outlet, Donald Trump continued to escalate his anti-immigrant rhetoric. Take a listen.
We have languages that are like from the planet Mars. Nobody knows how to, speak it. And then these students, and I'm not blaming them, I'm saying they put the students in the place of our students, like in New York City. We have these wonderful students. They're going to school. All of a sudden, they no longer have a seat. They're no longer invited to the school. We're putting migrants in who don't speak the language. They have no idea what the teacher's saying. And we have children that are no longer going to school. They're coming from places unknown, and they're rough people, in many cases from jails, prisons, from mental institutions, insane asylums. Insane asylum, that's Silence of the Lambs stuff. Hannibal Lecter. Anybody know Hannibal Lecter? We don't want him in this country. And terrorists are coming in at numbers that we haven't seen in many, many decades. It's crazy what they're doing. It doesn't make sense. What they're doing is they're poisoning our country by allowing people to come in by the millions.
Yes, fascist echoes there. Vaughn, Donald Trump also called into Fox News this morning. What is his closing message today?
Right. Donald Trump clearly is not very deterred from any threat that he sees from Nikki Haley. For Donald Trump, the night before Super Tuesday, a year ago, maybe thought that he would have been holding a campaign rally in one of the 16 states that is voting here today. But instead, you saw them talking to that Trump loyal network right here at his estate at Mar-a-Lago. He will be here and holding an event tonight as well. Donald Trump, you said it. He did just call into Fox and Friends here just in the last hour, and he was repeatedly asked whether he would try to strike what would effectively be a peace deal with Nikki Haley, and repeatedly demurred, but suggested that it was time for the Republican Party to unify. Of course, when I repeat those words, I think it's also important context to note that just 36 hours ago on his social media account, he was referring to Nikki Haley as bird brain. And I was just messaging with one Trump ally here and said, what is the expectations for tonight? And frankly, here at Mar-a-Lago, their expectation is that they're going to win every single state, and And in the words of this ally, they will have a fun night and the bird will not. And frankly, when you look at it from Trump's perspective, compare this to 8 years ago on Super Tuesday. I was covering Ted Cruz at the time in the state of Texas when Ted Cruz beat him by a 2-1 margin. But Texas was not the only place that Donald Trump lost that day. He also, in fact, he lost in places including Arkansas, Colorado, Maine, Minnesota, Oklahoma, and Utah. So fast forward to where we are today and where the polling stand, Donald Trump and his team feels good, and they're ready to expend their resources on Joe Biden and the Democrats and not continue to spend any money here focused on Nikki Haley in this Republican primary that they deem all but over. Mika?
All right, NBC's Von Hilliard, thank you very much. Where to begin, Jonathan Lemire?
Yeah, first let's fact check that what he said about New York City's schools and migrants. That's simply not true.
So much there.
That didn't happen. Simone, though, he's doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on this anti-immigration rhetoric that, frankly, began his political career. There was the birtherism lie about Barack Obama, but as he came down the escalator in 2015, he talked about Mexican immigrants, calling them rapists and the like, and now it just continues. Immigration is certainly a hot button topic this time around. Is this rhetoric going to help him at all?
Look, there are obviously people that like the rhetoric that Donald Trump is serving up.
Like, who are those people laughing in the room?
Exactly.
What was funny about that? It was disgraceful, disgusting, inhuman behavior.
Yes. And frankly, folks should probably zoom in and try to find the people on the sides and see who they were so we can go and find them and ask them questions. But this is, to your point, the rhetoric that he had when he first came down that escalator, right? He has continued to enjoy support since then. And so I know people are listening like, how is Donald Trump still in this race? Because people are supporting him in places across the country still. And so, look, I think that Democrats, people in the news media, other Republicans that do not agree with what Donald Trump is saying, they need to call it out. It is very important. You cannot let the rhetoric slide. And every time we talk about immigration, since Donald Trump wants to bring it up, we also have to talk about the fact that there was a bill that Congress negotiated that there was a very strong border security bill that is not law right now because Donald Trump told Republican legislators not to get on board. That is the whole reason. Because why? It was going to help Joe Biden. Donald Trump does not care about the immigration crisis happening in this country. What his campaign is about, what his whole ethos is about, has nothing to do with policy. Everything to do with, rhetoric and aesthetic.
But Simone, with all due respect to you as a certified member of the national media, you're missing the point. The point is...
What's that?
Joe Biden is 81 years old.
So?
That's the story we have to cover.
Oh.
That's the story that is in every major American newspaper, sometimes quite often on the front page above the fold.
So you'll either get your
choice is
the 81-year-old or the potential criminal. You're 81-year-old or the bigot, 81-year-old or the racist.
In terms of
81-year-old or the fascist.
In terms of how we lead our lives on an everyday basis, okay? The 81-year-old knows that no New York City school child is being thrown out of a seat to have someone who just crossed the border replace them in that classroom. The 81-year-old who people talk about all day long in the news media is the person who says, I can fix the border, but they won't let me.
Right.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party. The 81-year-old who people say, oh, gee, he shuffles along. He walks a little too slowly for me. He's the one who stands between them and having no health insurance.
Yeah.
Okay? The 81-year-old...
Who brought their diabetes
The 81-year-old is the guy who has presided over the healthiest, fastest-growing economy in the last 30 years. The 81-year-old is the guy who gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning and works all day to try and keep the Middle East from inflaming itself even more than it's inflamed.
Still on the phone.
Mike has receipts. That's what Mike has the receipts. Yes, Joe Biden knows how to do the job, is doing the job, and has demonstrated he can do the job. That is what it is about. Like, it's not about age. And then on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who What he is doing is very dangerous.
It's
like Donald Trump
so
is not just talking. There are people that have acted on his rhetoric. We have example after example after example. Insurrection. I mean, the folks who took up arms against the FBI offices across the country, people who have demonized and put a target on the back of LGBTQ plus Americans. Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi. Like, what happens when someone gets killed?
I mean, this has happened. We had the January 6th insurrection and people died that day. I mean, I believe that people died that day at the behest of Donald Trump. I believe that also tens of thousands of people are dead from COVID because he kept that information from the American people and then mismanaged it and misled people through that pandemic to epic proportions.
Disproportionately, African-American individuals in this country were hit worse by COVID, and
now women
most people
are dying.
died. And now women are dying.
Because of Roe.
So there's a story to tell.
This is your choice.
There is a story to tell. And to Mike's point, I think what Mike is saying is all we seem to read about is the age and how old the current president of the United States is. I think more people need to talk about the policy. What Donald Trump is saying, Project 2025, you know, his little trying to turn the Department of Health into the Department of Life.
If Joe Biden is doddering, I'll have what he's having. That's all. We're going to have more with Simone just ahead. Plus, the biggest blizzard of the season just slammed California's Sierra Nevada mountains, leaving many towns buried under several feet of snow. We'll show you where the blizzard is now as winter storm warnings remain in effect. And hours from now, jury selection in the trial of James Crumbley, the father of the Oxford, Michigan shooter, set to begin. The evidence the jury will weigh is next on Morning Joe. Californians are bracing for another storm system after a massive blizzard dumped several feet of snow on the Sierra Nevada mountains. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has the latest.
This morning, the race is on to dig out vehicles and homes from a weekend blizzard before snow from a new storm starts piling up again.
We had grass coming up in our yard on Thursday, and now our windows are all buried on our house, so.
This is the aftermath of an intense multi-day storm that unleashed a life-threatening assault on the Mountain West, dumping 5 to 10 feet of snow across the region.
It was full on. Like, it was definitely some pretty intense periods of whiteout conditions.
The region's major thoroughfare, Interstate 80, finally reopening after disrupting traffic and commerce for days.
It has been a real mess.
If you live in it, then you're used to it. But if you're not, I would just say don't come up here if you don't have to.
Because of heavy snow and winds that reached 190 miles per hour at the highest peaks, officials and locals still urging caution on the roads.
We've just been taking it slow, you know, going 25, 30 miles an hour.
The storm effectively ending the season's snow drought, bringing California's snowpack level up to 104% of normal, up from just 32% at the start of this calendar year. Lake Tahoe's famous ski resorts opening back up carefully, with conditions still sketchy up top and deep powder everywhere.
Today we're going to go ski some mellow tree lines and hopefully avoid the avalanches.
NBC's Steve Patterson with that report. Jury selection begins this morning in the trial of James Crumbley, the father of the Oxford, Michigan high school shooter. He is facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The trial comes after a jury found his wife guilty of the same charge last month. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has more.
This morning, a month after that guilty verdict gripped the country,
we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
James Crumbley starts trial with jury selection for his role in a mass school shooting carried out by his son, Ethan. His wife, Jennifer, was the first parent in the U.S. held criminally responsible for a school shooting carried out by their child. Both charged with 4 counts, 1 count for each student killed. Prosecutors say Ethan used a semi-automatic handgun allegedly bought by his dad as a gift days before the shooting. They also argued Jennifer was negligent and ignored the warnings. Crumbley's parents were called to his high school the morning of the shooting over concerns about a drawing he made of a gun and a message, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me."
She did not give him the help that he wanted.
But Jennifer Crumbley's defense team said her husband, James, was responsible for the storage and safety of the gun.
I just didn't feel comfortable being in charge of that. It was more his thing, so I let him handle that. I didn't feel comfortable putting the lock thing on it.
Experts say James's attorneys likely watched Jennifer's trial closely to adjust their strategy. The jury foreperson telling Savannah on Today that Jennifer's testimony and evidence was pivotal for jurors.
Jennifer didn't separate her son from the gun enough to save those lives that day.
Craig Schilling's son, Justin, was among the 4 killed.
He's always on my heart. He helps her have to stay high. You know, I mean, you're in it. You want the accountability. You want the right verdict.
NBC's Stephanie Gosk with that report. And still ahead, we'll bring you the concerning results of a new study on young children and screen time. Plus, Luke Russert joins us to talk about the new event series, MSNBC Live, and his conversation with former Republican Governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, on why he's now running for Senate. Luke's back. Morning Joe will be right back.
Would you have supported the Senate bill that it seemed President Trump effectively killed by coming out against it?
It's why I decided to run for the Senate, actually. I had never given any consideration to this race. I'd said 100 times I didn't aspire to become a senator. I didn't need a job. I wasn't looking for another title. But 3 weeks ago on a Wednesday night, when I saw a real solution to secure the border and provide funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, something that most of the Republican senators had said was all those things were important, and they were told to vote against what they believed in, and made me frustrated and angry enough to say, I think I'm going to go down there and try to do something about this.
Former Maryland Governor, Republican Larry Hogan, explaining why he decided to jump into the Maryland Senate race. That conversation took place yesterday during MSNBC Live, a new event series featuring in-person conversations with newsmakers. And joining us now, the host and creative director of MSNBC Live, Luke Russert. Luke, you didn't tell me.
Pleasure to be here, Mika. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, and I love this concept. Tell us more about it. Before we get into the Hogan interview, what are you doing?
Well, the first thing is we have to book you to appear because you are the star power that we need. So keep your phone handy. But essentially what we're trying to do is have thoughtful conversations, solutions-based conversations in person with some of the leading newsmakers of the day, and really try to get to a place of, listen, we want to foster a connection to deal with some of the most vexing issues facing in America. Often the most partisan ideas aren't the best. When you have people in a room, they come together and they have a conversation. Like it happened in America for many, many years, solutions come out of that, whether it's public-private partnerships, whether it's people in the activist space, hearing people out, not seeing everybody as an enemy, and getting to a place of what can be done to solve some of these most challenging things that our country faces. So that's really what our core of it is at MSNBC Live. We're taking it around the country, God willing, and we want to bring in some of our contributors and some of our best MSNBC talent to help foster these conversations with people around the country.
Okay, Simone and I want to do a Know Your Value event.
Yes,
so,
yes, sign us up.
Simone was there yesterday.
Yeah.
She was great. She had a wonderful time. Thanks for coming, Simone.
My pleasure. It was an amazing event, Luke, and I think what was so great about it is bringing all of these different people together. Kornacki was at the big board giving a preview, and what I heard from folks is that they just really, they want to know more. Larry Hogan broke a little news yesterday. I didn't know that was the impetus for him getting in. So I thought it was a really engaging conversation, and we also heard from Quentin Fulks from the Biden campaign.
Wow.
So it was well timed.
You know what's so cool about this, Luke, is that we have been all sort of moving to remote post-COVID. I think COVID, in fact, a lot of kids were trying to get them out of their houses. So this is good that you're sort of like trying to promote that connection, that where things really can happen when we're together in a room.
There is a real value, I think, post-pandemic in gathering again. And I was fortunate in the last year to go on a book tour for my memoir, Look For Me There. And I got to meet a lot of people around the country. And the same thing I heard everywhere was, you know, we are a lot more alike than we are different. And when you're in a room and you have those connections, that value and those ethos comes through.
Yeah.
And we have at MSNBC the ability to foster these conversations. I mean, yesterday we had Sophia Bush, the famous actress, with her business partner Naomi Bax come in and talk about how women and minorities often don't get enough capital to launch successful businesses and what can be done to change that. And then you have Steve Kornacki on with the magic map. And then you have Jen Psaki and Quentin Folks about the Biden campaign and what they have to overcome. And then Larry Hogan saying to me equivocally he will not support Donald Trump under any circumstances. So you really have a boatload of fascinating, interesting conversations which touches on all these different things that America is dealing with, but gets to a place where there are solutions and there's people who want to work to achieve real, tangible, positive results.
Mike Barnicle, the kids are all grown up. Look at this.
Barnicle's another tough booking. Mike Barnicle is a very tough booking, too.
Oh, you'll never get him.
You don't have to baseball, maybe?
Not a chance.
They are all grown up. Look, what's the logistical plan here for this venue? Do you travel? Do you go different places? How's it going to work?
I think our goal is to really get it around the country. If it worked out, I would love to have people in Cleveland or Buffalo be able to meet Mike Barnicle in person. I think we'll start off in Washington and New York, where our talent is most easily accessible. But I think down the line, one of the more value adds is that, you know, people want to meet who they see on TV. They want to be in the same room as them. And they also want to see, I think, that the thoughtful conversations that don't happen when there's a red blinking light. As you know, and as Mika, you've done a lot of those events, there's a sort of spontaneity where people feel more comfortable. It's a lunch setting. It's a dinner setting. We might even have a cocktail setting and hear some really interesting stuff down the line. So that's really the goal, though. But, yeah, Mike, I think there is real value in getting things out of D.C. outside of the Acela corridor, and that is ultimately my goal with this project.
Jonathan Lemire.
Michael, come if there's free food, Luke. Let's talk a little bit more about your interview yesterday with Governor Hogan. You know, who he toyed with the idea of perhaps running as a third-party candidate for president. No labels, was openly flirting with him. He's opted against that, but going for the Senate instead. Tell us more about what he sees as his path.
I thought it was really interesting that he said that the thing that was a catalyst for him to run for Senate was a phone call from former President Bush saying we need more independent-minded leaders, and then also that he was upset that the Senate GOP and Donald Trump killed that bipartisan bill. But, Jonathan, you're absolutely right, the immigration bill, rather, but you're absolutely right. Maryland is a 2-to-1 Democratic state. Federal races, you see a lot more tribal partisan politics. So he has a real uphill battle. But he unequivocally told me that he will not support Donald Trump in any capacity. There's a sort of peace right now between Donald Trump and him. Trump has not been publicly attacking him. It would be interesting if that's actually beneficial for Hogan at some point, if he can go more toe-to-toe with Trump publicly. But he faces an uphill battle. That being said, when he left office, he had some of the highest approval ratings for any governor in the country. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Maryland was so much to the left that they would bring things that didn't really strike a good chord with moderates, and Hogan would veto them. And by the process of vetoing them, the legislation would become more moderate, even though it was a veto-proof legislature. So it'll be a very interesting race. He's not your typical Republican. He's pro-funding for Ukraine. He absolutely wants a bipartisan immigration bill. Maryland is a majority-minority state. It has over 1 million foreign-born residents. So he's somebody that, if there is a Republican mold like that, it certainly would probably win this presidential race and could be more beneficial in the future. But they don't seem to have gone in that direction for quite a long time.
Host and creative director of MSNBC Live, Luke Russert. Thank you very much, Luke. You've made me very happy. Thank you.
I can't wait to see you, Mika. Yeah. Take care.
All right, you too. All right, still ahead, another reason to limit screen time, especially for younger kids. We'll bring you the finding of a new study next on Morning Joe. A new study is showing how screen time is affecting children's speech development and comprehension. Research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found the average toddler is missing out on hearing more than 1,000 words spoken by an adult each day due to screen exposure. The study tracked 220 Australian families over 2 years, with the effects most pronounced at 3 years old. The average 3-year-old is exposed to 2 hours and 52 minutes of screen time a day. For every extra minute of screen exposure, the toddlers in the study were hearing 7 fewer words, speaking 5 fewer words themselves, and engaging in 1 less conversation. Researchers say a language-rich home environment is crucial in supporting infants and toddlers' language development. That is absolutely stunning. We know this, though. Doesn't it seem obvious if the parents and the kids are on tablets?
Well, that's the point. We do know this.
We know this.
And you reflect upon how children were raised as recently as 10, 12 years ago, completely different than it is today. I mean, the number of children, young children, walking around with a phone in their hand or an iPad in their hand who are impossible to, eye contact is missing.
We've always been strict with screen time for our kids, and I do worry about the ramifications decades from now. How are these children going to grow up differently than everyone else because their experience is so different now because of these screens?
So we know this so much, Simone. I wonder why Congress doesn't, or honestly, why there aren't regulations even from these companies who, by the way, the people who run these tech companies don't let their kids have phones.
I mean, I think the companies don't want to have to take the responsibility. Congress doesn't really want to wade into the responsibility. So it's up to the rest of us.
It's going to be cigarettes.
It's up to parents.
It's up to parents.
Wake up.
Class action.
I like to take the iPad away from dinner.
There you go.
They don't like
that
me to
does
do
it
that,
for
but I
us
do.
this morning. I'm taking it away. Ana Cabrera picks up the coverage right now.